Good morning, friends, and welcome to week 3, day 3 of the Priscilla Shirer Elijah Bible study. This is my summary, and she titles this one, Anyone But Her. Yesterday we talked about anywhere but here, Lord. He sent Elijah to Zarephath to be refined again. And remember, the meaning of Zarephath is to go into a smeltering furnace or to be refined. And so it's just funny how God specifically places him in a town that is, literally comes from the meaning of that. And he sends him to find a widow. And I love how Priscilla starts off by painting this beautiful story. It's actually not beautiful, but this story of this prophet, this exhausted, hungry, unkempt Jewish man who walks into the city gates of this pagan town, and he has to find the widow that God has called him to find. So outside of being an Israelite, he fits in really well. Like, he blends in. No one really knows that he's any different, right? He's going through the same drought that they are. But the Bible says that he just knew who she was. And there's no other way that could have happened other than a true prophetic instinct, right? Like, God gave him the clue. I mean, the only clue that he had was that she was widow, but God gave him the knowledge to know exactly who she was, where she was, and, he walked right up to her. He finally sees her, and he realizes that that's her, and he walks up to her and basically just says, hey, I need your help. And I love that, if you think about, Priscilla says, if you think about widows and their social economic stance on the ladder of that day, widows were the lowest of the low. Women in general were low compared to the men, but widows were even lower, right? They didn't have anyone to take care of them. And so they kind of waited around the city as well to be provided for. But it's funny that God puts two weak people together. Elijah had nothing to offer her because he himself had been going through this period of being in need, having to depend on God to wait for food and water, and God was purposely sending him to these places for that. And so God happens to give him a widow who also has nothing, who's weak, and in fact, when he sees her and meets her, he asks her to bring him water. And then he asks her for bread. And she says, she goes to get him the water, but whenever he asks her for the bread, she says, well, listen, as the Lord your God says, I don't have any bread. In fact, all I have is a little bit of oil and a little bit of flour, but I was just about to make the last bit of it for me and my son so that we could just go die. That's how bad things were. And, Elijah just says, okay, go make it. I promise you, God is going to provide for us, and you're going to have more after this. And she does. She just does it, y'all. Just does it. And, that just blows my mind. But not only does God call him to a place that's unreasonable, he calls him to make a connection there with a person who's nothing, who's insignificant. And I imagine he was, oh my gosh, Lord, anywhere but here and anyone but her. If we're honest, we all have those moments. But she asked us to think about what type of refining or lesson or pruning do we think Elijah's going to learn meeting up with this widow? And she says, do you think it's pride, prejudice, doubt, compassion? And then she says, what else comes to mind? And for me, empathy comes to mind because, sometimes you have to live like someone lives to fully understand what they're going through, right? And I think that Elijah's going to get a taste of what it's like to live as a widow. And I think he's going to have empathy for her and her son. And not everyone has that, or sympathy or empathy, but I think those are some things that he'll experience as well. It's definitely going to be an humbling experience. He's a man, and he should be able to offer and provide for her, but he's going to have to be asking her for help. And I imagine that's, a very humbling experience. She says that a lot of people find it hard to receive even just a compliment. We want to say, oh, thank you, but, there's always a but. And we really don't want to receive help for others. And that one is me 100%. I don't even like people to know my weaknesses. So to ask them to help me is letting them know I have a weakness. But it's asking, what are the primary reasons do you think we resist asking others for help? Or, why do we not want to receive any kind of assistance. And so, y'all, I checked all of them. I don't know. I feel like I struggle in this area really, on the daily. I do. So the first one says, I like others to view me as helping them, not helping the other way around. I love to help, and I don't know. My pride hinders me from being authentic and open about my need. I mean, yeah, it's not really my pride. I'm like embarrassed. I guess that's pride. Other people's problems always seem more pressing than mine. I mean, I do, in the grand scheme of things, especially in the field of work that I'm in, some of my students don't even have their own bed. They take turns sleeping on a bed. Some of them sleep on the floor, and some of them don't have food at night. When they go home, their only meals are what they get at school. And so to me, this one's really true. Like, so many other people have more problems than mine. And then this one, I think I secretly tend to bask in feeling superior to others. I didn't even want to say that one out loud, and at first I was like, I don't do that. But we do, y'all. We really do. I think I don't have that problem. That looks really bad when you look at it from afar, but if you take an internal, check, it's really us sometimes. We think we are, above some of these problems that other people are having, and no, it's not true. It's easier to hide my lack and pretend to be okay. That one is me. Just keep on going. Just keep going. Just hide it. Everything's fine. Singing the same song every day. And then the last one is, I just don't want to be a burden on anyone. I think this one is it too. I don't want to seem inadequate either. And I don't know. I do. But, all of these things are somewhere that we can all be refined at, right? We can all be, put into the fire of refining. And, lots of our attitudes just need to be tuned up a little. Some of us need our attitudes tuned up a lot. Some people still have very raw, harsh feelings when someone hurts them, right? And, you've got to get to a place in your life where when someone wrongs you, that it's, okay, maybe they were just having a bad day, or, okay, maybe they didn't mean it, I took it wrong. Maybe I'm having a bad day, and then sometimes there's just some really mean people out there, and we have to just say, I just need to pray for them. But most of the time we have ugly thoughts back to them. Well, I wish I could just push them over, or wish I could trip them in the hallway when they walk by, or maybe I should just give them a little shoulder shrug. Some people have these thoughts, and, our attitudes need refining all the time. But in Kerith, Elijah was on the receiving end of this miraculous provision. He's used to it. So for like a year and a half, maybe he's accustomed to this. He's been in need. He's been feeling dependent, and he's been feeling what it means to not have sufficient supplies, and to be dependent on God. So in this new assignment, he's going into the furnace of Zarephath, and he is literally going to be refined and in another unique way. And it's one thing, it's one thing for the ravens to bring him food, right, and water, and God, okay, God, that's a miracle. But it's another thing to humble yourself in front of another human being and let them know that, you're struggling and you need their help. And that's what he has to do. Elijah has to get real with this widow, and he has to, share some of his honesty and all of the things that, have been on his heart and what he's been going through. But that's what Zarephath is. It cuts you down to size, y'all. It's taking you from here to just perfectly what is needed to do the mission for God. So not only does Elijah's pride and his self-reliance, and any sort of supremacy just by being a man compared to the widow, during this relationship, he's going to have to be submitting that to his Zarephath. Like, this is something he's going to have to submit in this time. But there's a really cool ending, right? Because number one, she says he gets to be a participant in God's bigger plan. So in the moment, it seems shameful, and your pride is sky high, and it's hard to humble yourself and say, I need your help, to a widow, the lowest of the low. But he gets to be a participant in God's bigger plan. And, Elijah, he's aware, right? He's aware of her situation versus his. And he's probably wondering, why, God, did you send him to a Gentile widow where there's so many Jewish ones that needed him? But God was like, no, this is her. So God testifies this ultimate plan for redemption of humanity. Like this is where God shows up, and he shows off that, listen, Elijah, I'm not just here for the Jews. I'm here for everyone, even this low of the low Gentile widow who has nothing to give you, but I'm here for her. I'm here for everyone. And no one is above getting it all. And no one is so far down the ladder that they won't get it. You know, you can't be too rich or too poor. It can't be a male or female, Gentile, Jew. God says he literally comes for everyone. And this is his redemption story. So this is another thing that Elijah's having to learn, that it's not just for the prophets like him and the people who have followed God. You know, he's going to have to realize that no one is too big or too small for God's grace. So we're all one in Christ, and we need to remember that. Another thing that, she says to do is to make it personal. Where do you fall short in this area? Where do you allow these prejudices, great or small? How do you learn from them, and how do you try to recognize them so that you can understand you have one, right? For me, I'm scared of rejection, and I'm scared of people being too harsh, and I don't like people to see me mess up, and so sometimes I just try to hide the ways that God's teaching me, and that's not good either. But she says that the second thing that is really cool when we surrender to this type of situation is that we get to be a partner in God's miraculous provision, and that's exactly what Elijah gets to do. Not only does he go and humble himself to this widow, but he also gets to show her and her family like God's miracles, because Elijah's authenticity, it's God not only teaching him that he's not so different from her. They both have a need, but they both need water, they both need bread, but his emptiness allows him to build this bridge this gap between him and her and their differences. And so whenever she trusts him and he trusts her, and all the things start falling into place, God turns that little bit of oil and that little bit of bread into something miraculous, right? The oil never runs dry, and the flour never runs empty. And so she says that you yourself may be scarce and lacking, dried up in places that, you wouldn't even imagine. And you think, God can't use me. I am dried up. There is nothing I have that I can give, or I'm not qualified for that position, or, I'm just empty and I have nothing to give. But this story alone proves that you're not too dried up to give. You're not too dried up for God to use. But for Elijah, his own need is what built that bridge to the widow. So when we let others know of our needs, we can connect on a deeper level and start living for God together, and those miracles start happening, and God's provision is so noticeable. So we have to keep that in mind, and just remember that you can be a participant in the bigger plan, and you can be a part of the miracles and providing for other people. So don't be scared of what you don't have, because one day someone else is going to learn from that.